Hey everyone, welcome to week 65. Today is day 4. Today is Thursday. This is our 4th day on our compressed week. Now remember, compressed doesn't mean that every single moment of the painting is going to have to answer to a smaller range in the value scale. There may be still accents of saturation, accents of contrast, but the whole of the painting will try to be balanced within that small value range. So we'll see how we're going to do today.
Okay, let's get started. This is Thursday. This is day 4. This is our 4th day on our compressed week. And hopefully I've been able to tap into some of the qualities that lie outside the very evident formal aspects of the exercise that we're doing this week. Because, like I've said on prior days, it is very easy to understand this exercise. It is actually quite simple, and it can be very mechanical if we choose to pre-mix paint. There's nothing weird about this exercise. Probably the toughest part is just to be concentrated on the values of the mixes that you're doing. If you want to have a ton of hues, you just have to be aware that they have to correspond to the values that you've established that are going to be in your restricted scale. And that's about it. If you're working with an open palette, you just have to exercise a little more discipline and just know that even though you don't have set parameters in your palette, you don't have pre-mixes that are going to guide you, you just have to be conscious of what you're mixing and the relationships you're creating in your painting. If you see this exercise from a technical standpoint, there's nothing weird or strange about it. It's very, very simple. It's very fundamental. And it's a really fun exercise to do when you want to try and explore the different expressive possibilities that lie within the value range, the value scale. Because we tend to think of the value scale as something that we reference in order for us to faithfully translate nature. If we want to be able to understand how form turns in space, we have to be very mindful of how the form turns in space and how those changes have corresponding values. And if we can do that consistently, we are going to be able to speak about three-dimensionality. It's as simple as that. But as I was saying, many times we see this value scale just as a reference point. It's almost like where we check ourselves, where we turn to just to check if our value relationships are right. But we tend to forget that it can also be a wonderfully expressive tool. And as I was saying, hopefully with the first 3 paintings, we've started to understand that even though there's not a lot of narrative in these paintings, a lot of them is just this suggested atmosphere that surrounds the painting. The way in which we as observers interact with an image that proposes that atmosphere is quite different if it was a painting that had as its only aim to describe. And I think that was very true for yesterday's painting. Yesterday's painting puts me in trouble because when I'm painting Fer, and I think I started to touch upon this at the end of yesterday's video, but when I paint Fer, I have this instinct to want to paint something very light, something that's very close to my heart. It's almost as if I know that she's this real person. I know that she's developing into this amazingly complex human being. She has this weird sense of humor that I adore. So I know that she's growing right in front of my eyes. And the growing part almost feels like she's materializing. As she gets older, she just feels more real. She just feels more solid. And I'm not saying that when she was a baby or when she was like a little toddler, she wasn't. She was ethereal. But there's something about their personality and them becoming who they are that just grounds them. And I can see that in my daughter and obviously in Samu. With my son, he's 13 now. I've been through this. I know what to expect. It's a really, really amazing feeling. But even though I rationally understand that she's getting older, I know that she's becoming this human being that has a very specific set of beliefs and personality, and she questions things. I think I still hold on to the idea of both my son and my daughter being these beings of light. They just emit light, and that's all my heart needs just to be alive in this world. So it is very strange for me to go against that instinct of depicting Fer or Samu as these beings that are very, very hard to grasp. If I could paint them in like a couple of strokes, I would be so satisfied. There's nothing determined about them. That's the idea that I have of my kids. Even if they grow old, I think I'm still going to see them as my little kids, as these fragile little beings, for example. And I think this is going to be true for today's painting of Colleen. When I was painting Samu, I always watch the videos, after Danny edits them. And not just to hear myself talk, because I really don't like to listen to myself. I always think I sound like an idiot, by the way. But I do like to see myself paint. And I always try to pay attention to the decisions that I'm making. It's always super, super interesting to see how I fumbled the painting or how I was able to connect everything. That's when painting feels wonderful. Or how I was really, really struggling with something and there were moments where I was able to pull it off. And it's always really fun to me. It's always fascinating to try and identify where I broke down or where I was able to pick up the pieces and sort of reconstruct the painting and give it a new direction and save it from the disaster that it was. I love to evaluate myself in that way. And there's a moment during Samu's painting that I felt was so beautiful. And it happened very quickly. I mean, it happens really quickly in the video because it's a video that compresses the actual time that I used to execute the painting. So maybe this happened in the 40-minute mark, real-time painting, where I hadn't done much. I think I just put a bit of the gray in the background just to have as a basis for midtone. Like I didn't want to stray too far away. I didn't want to make my darks be too dark when compared to that value. So I had put that down as my atmosphere. And when I kind of blocked in what was going to be this massive light, there's a moment there that I saw the painting and I was like, I should have stopped there. And I know, for sure it wouldn't have been like a realized painting. The painting wouldn't have solved what I had set out to do when I started the painting. But by pausing the painting right there, I was like, that is very beautiful. That feels like Samu. At the end of the painting, that's Samu. There's no doubt in my heart that that's my son. It's a very exaggerated version of my son. Like I gave him a neck like a giraffe. He thought it was funny. But as I was saying, that's my Samu. That final painting, that is my son. There's no doubt in my heart that that's my son. But when I was looking at that video, there was a moment where I said, that's like the essence of my son. That's the idea that I have of my son that I can't really grasp, or maybe I don't want to grasp, because I do want to maintain the idea of them being little kids. So like I was saying with yesterday's painting of Fer, it's very strange for me to say, I'm going to paint, one of the two angels that I have in my life. And suddenly, like I said yesterday, I just saw this kind of darkness to her. And it's weird. It's so incredibly strange to say, okay, I'm going to accept whatever I'm seeing and I'm going to try to deal with it while I'm painting. I think that that's when the act of painting just becomes alive, because I totally put my hands down, and I speak about this a lot. Like I was not pushing back. The act of painting was not going to understand me as an obstacle. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to embrace this and I'm going to try to paint this very eerie feeling that I'm getting from this image. And that's why when I was looking at the painting, I was like, okay, this kind of reminds me of some of Sickert's paintings. And for today's painting, just to tie it a little bit with Sickert, there is a wonderful, wonderful portrait that Sickert did of George Moore. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this portrait. I loved that if you go to the Tate webpage, they say that the painting was commended as well as being derided as a boiled ghost. And I just love that description. Boiled ghost. That's amazing. That's a brand right there. BoiledGhost.com. That's killer. I think that's as good as Lasagna Cadaver. If you go to lasagnacadaver.com right now, it redirects you to our Painted Lives. That's how cool our Painted Lives is. So anyway, Boiled Ghost is a spot-on description. And this painting in particular reminded me of something that Milo Hartnell is very good at doing. Very, very good. I think Milo is a terrific painter. Just as a little side story, Milo went, not because I needed to teach him anything, he's an incredible painter, but Milo went to one of my workshops that I did in London. And when I saw him paint, I was like, oh, dude, I can't really teach anything to you. But I remember he got in late because he was always coming in late. It's Milo. So he had a terrible spot, like terrible spot in terms of lighting. Now, the place that we were doing this workshop at, it wasn't a great place in terms of having available light. We had to work really hard at trying to create lighting conditions that could be enjoyable when painting. But honestly, if you're a good painter, all of that sounds like an excuse to do a bad painting, because good painters are capable of painting anywhere. It doesn't matter if you have a really nice skylight or natural light, doesn't matter. But Milo was in a really objectively crappy spot, and he asked for my help. He was like, "Oh, could you help me out, because this is really tough." And lighting was tough. The drawing was super, super tough because the pose was kind of foreshortened. I painted with him for about, I don't know, half an hour, and I honestly couldn't paint. I mean, and it's not like, oh, you caught me in a bad day. No, it's just like it was too hard for me. That was the truth. And Milo being Milo, he was like, yeah, you suck too. And it was so cool because I told him, I was like, yeah, dude, this is like tough. This is just a reminder that there are things that are just very, very tough. And this was out of my league. Like, solving this in a sort of cogent manner was something that I didn't have the ability to do at that time. And I still don't think that I do right now. Like, if I would put myself right now in that position again, I think I would do badly. I think that my drawing ability and the fact that I'm very expressive and I attack a painting weren't really the necessary tools that I needed to solve that in an effective fashion. I think that I needed to be far more careful with my drawing. I think I needed to be far more patient. And those two things, careful with my drawing and patient, yeah, those are not attributes that I have. So I think that I would still struggle. But as I was saying, Milo, I think, is the king of blobness. Milo says that this is something that he liked about my work. And I feel flattered that he sees that as a quality in my painting. But I think that he took that blobness and he started embracing it in a way where he does it 1,000 times better than anything that I could do. Many times, a lot of people say, hey, I love this aspect of what you do with your work, but they are doing it in ways that you had never even thought of. Like, they're expanding on this tiny little thing that you do, and that little thing has become their starting point. And it's amazing. And I think that the blob quality of Milo's paintings far surpasses the blob quality in my paintings. So that painting of George Moore just reminds me a lot of Milo. I was trying to think, because I've been to London now 2 times, and I'm trying to think if I saw this George Moore portrait at the Tate, and I don't remember. And I have a feeling that I would remember if I saw it. And the reason that I'm kind of pissed at myself for not remembering is that I don't really know if those are the colors of that portrait. I don't know. They just seemed a little too punchy. But that's the image that the Tate has in their webpage, so I have to trust it a little bit, I guess. The reason that I'm referencing these blobish portraits is because, again, I think that there was a push and pull with this portrait that I did of Colleen today. I really like the way it ended up feeling. In the end, I think that it's a very expressive portrait, but there's a Colleen-ness in there. I've never met Colleen, only virtually, but I think I got to the place where I wanted to with the portrait. But here's the big but. There are initial moments during that painting where the painting is far more open that I really, really liked. And I had the same feeling when I was looking back at this painting, at the making of the painting, that I did when I was looking at Samu's painting on Tuesday. I was like, oh, that was better. Danny was showing me the edit of this video, and she was just scrubbing through the video, and I was like, oh, that's better. All I do from like minute 30 or 40 is just ruin the painting, and what I end up with is just like the best of a bad job. And I know I'm being like really hard on myself. And I know that the end painting, when I just look at it objectively, when I just step back and get outside of my head, I look at the painting, I'm like, no, that's a cool painting. That's a really cool ass painting. Like, I'm doing a ton of stuff there that I really, really enjoy. But I think that it's not just about saying, oh, I did a really cool painting, but it's just about recognizing instances during the making of that painting where you say, okay, there's possibilities in the making of this painting. I can spot future possibilities. I can see myself being far more patient and just taking way, way more time in this initial instance of the painting. And I think, well, this is my hope. Like, we've told you guys that our painted lives is really a 2-year journey. We really do feel that it has to be. It's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. But I would love to explore like a third year or whatever that would be. You know, maybe it could be something a little bit different, but I would love to do a third year where I just give myself more time with images. You know, and I would love if people could go through that journey with me because it's something completely different. And I would love to do it through live videos just so that people can see real-time painting. Again, I know that, you know, 3-hour long videos, people don't like those. Like nobody watches that on YouTube. People watch a video for 10, 11 minutes, tops. That's what YouTube is kind of like made for. But I think that way we could do something that feels a little bit different. So maybe now we just have to find a way how to finance that third year. That's going to be the difficult part. But anyways, so again, the important thing about this is not to say that we finished the painting at a place where we think that it was not at its strongest, but to say, wow, there are lapses in this painting. There are instances in this painting where there's something that I could tap into and I could just make a lot from very little there. And the way that I can describe it, I think the only way that I can describe it is just by saying, I think I can spend a long time here. You know, I think that this could be my home for a very long time during this painting. I just have to teach myself how to pace myself so I can stay there and not just feel this urgency that I usually feel when we're doing these alla prima paintings that we record. So again, maybe that's what our third year could be, and it could be super interesting. But that's trying to look into the future, and we're not going to worry about that now. This is going to be it for today, and tomorrow we're going to do our final painting where we try to finish strong. We're going to try to do something very expressive also, a little bit oversized, but I think it's going to fit well the subject matter of the painting. There's going to be instances of the painting that are going to have a little more saturation, a little more contrast, but hopefully if I do this well, it's also going to be a painting that sort of emerges from atmosphere that I think is going to be really cool. But that's going to be tomorrow. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you. Love you. Bye.